So hello everyone and welcome to CiC's August webinar for 2022. Today we're going to be looking at remote and hybrid working. My name is Harry Key. I'm the head of global specialist services at CiC. First and foremost, I'm a psychotherapist, but a lot of the work I do these days is with organizations providing and putting together specialist support. And as I was saying just before we started the recording, this topic of remote hybrid working and what it's doing to our well-being, what it's doing to our mental health is a really, really key and prominent topic at the moment that I'd like us to discuss. So I'm going to take us through a little bit of a presentation, but as I said, and as always, please ask me questions, make comments in the chat. I can still see people are joining, so thank you for being here with us. So please do, let me know in the chat where you're calling in from. We've got a few people from Christian Blind Mission in various places across the world. We've got Lusayo in Malawi. Hi, nice to see you. We've got Andrew from Surrey and Borders NHS Trust. Leonie from Marshalls. Hi, Leonie. So please join in. The conversation here is really, really important. So I want to start us off with a bit of an overview, an outline of what we're looking at today. We're looking closely at the impact of remote and or hybrid working on our mental health, but we're going to discuss what are the global trends of this, what research currently shows us. I'm lucky enough to have a colleague in my team these days, Eliza, who's worked quite hard on researching this, and there isn't a huge amount of large-scale research going on at the moment. So perhaps we can answer some of the questions that brings up here today as well. So we're going to look at the global trends and research. We're going to look at particularly tuning into your needs whilst navigating this change and uncertainty. I'm going to share a couple of tools and techniques for doing that. There is someone in the chat who can't hear, so I'll have to just respond to them and ask them to rejoin. So managing changing environments and these new working models, it's going to be different for each of you. Some of you will be working in the same organization, maybe even in the same department, but you'll have different models that your team is working towards, different models that suit different job roles, that suit different working patterns, if some people are full-time or part-time, whatever it might be. So this is about your individual needs and your individual ability to cope with the change that's been thrown at us. We've got some best practice strategies for working remotely in the best, healthiest way possible. And I'll share some more information about the additional sources of support that are available from CiC and from elsewhere. So when we look into the global trends, we know that hybrid and remote working is here to stay. It's actually been, although many of us organization-wise were kind of forced into this due to the pandemic and made some pretty quick decisions to try and keep businesses and organizations running during that time. But we can see that 63% of high growth companies are going to be using a hybrid work model that's sticking around. There's a lot of benefits to people working from home, but also to sharing some time in the office. And as I said, I'm going to ask a few questions of you as an audience to try and gauge what that response is here as well. Majority of employees are in favor of hybrid work, 83% of them. Let us know in the chat here, what are you seeing, hearing, or experiencing? Hi, Nkoli from Abuja, Nigeria. Nice to have you dialing in. Nice to see you. Let us know in the chat. Is hybrid working something that your organization is talking about? Is it something that you're already doing? Is it a model that you favor? Do you find it a positive thing working in a hybrid model? Data from these global surveys across 15 different industries, so quite a broad range, show that just over half are experiencing disconnect from their organization. So whilst hybrid working is here to stay and the majority of us favor it, it is still causing some issues, particularly around that connection and being with others. Limited network opportunities are negatively impacting career growth, particularly for people who are earlier on in their career, less of that opportunity to collaborate with others, learn from them, pick up skills along the way through that osmosis of being around others. And although 72% of people say that virtual meetings improve inclusion and participation, and I'm one who's inclined to agree, I've noticed that throughout these live broadcasts that we're doing, that we get some really, really interesting points being made, particularly using a private message function, so people can feel a bit more open in these sessions. But despite that, 68%, nearly 3/4 of people say that there are too many virtual meetings to begin with. So let me know in the chat, How many meetings are you doing on a daily basis? Does it feel like too many? Got a few things here in the chat. Someone says here, hi, can we talk about remote and lone working? My post is pretty much this pattern. I need some support doing this. Yeah, lone working is a really important thing to consider. You know, people working remotely might have a choice in whether they're in the office or not. Other people might be in a post completely on their own with no colleagues to go and visit in an office. Yeah. Got Jackie here from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Hello, nice to see you. David says here, hybrid gets our thumbs up at Babcock International. Steve says we have it rolled out. Sharon says, I've been a remote and hybrid workers for over 10 years. It has its ups and downs. Yeah, I think so. You know, like most things, it's not going to be wholly positive or wholly negative, right? I think you've hit a really good point there. Yeah. And today we're going to discuss what those ups and downs are. Someone said here privately, it's a huge disconnect for me. As a lived experience mental health survivor as well. Yeah. We've got Dr. Zahid from Pakistan. Hi. We've got Amy from CBM in Rwanda. Nice to see you as well, Amy. Steph says here, I'm personally hearing that senior managers seem to be open to hybrid working, but sometimes people's colleagues that cannot always do it don't always like it. Yeah, we've always got to consider there are lots of roles that cannot be hybrid, that cannot be remote. And where that leaves those people with less choice, I guess, in a situation like this. Matt says hybrid working has changed so much. It's been so great at the University of Reading. It has positives and negatives, but overall so beneficial. Anne-Marie says, hello everyone, can I see more of your faces, please? It's up to all of you. If you want to be on camera, please do. If you prefer not to, it's absolutely fine. Someone's saying, yeah, oh, a nice wave from Anne-Marie, hi. You might be able to see more people if you press the buttons left and right on the top. There's often some more cameras that are on hiding behind the kind of interface there, Anne-Marie. Someone says here privately, I'm finding the constant jibes from the British press and senior government ministers about getting back to work and getting back into the office the most difficult part. I've really enjoyed remote working and the constant attack is hard to deal with. Can we address this at some point in this webinar? Well, I think this is a good time to address it. Global trends, yes, are often influenced by politics and government, particularly when it comes to what they're trying to do to influence the economy. One of my favorite things to do with that kind of information is just kind of take it and toss it away. That person, that politician, that government doesn't know me. They haven't spoken to me. They haven't taken the time to understand my job, my role, and what needs I have for being in the office or being at home. So really, they're not talking about me. They're generalizing. So I try my best to ignore it. I know that's not the easiest solution to that, but the only other solution, I guess, is to go and influence government, change their mind, get them to see it another way, or somehow get them to shut up. But that doesn't seem to work a lot of the time. So I'd rather just try and see this perspective that they don't know me, they don't understand the particular situation I'm in. Hopefully that helps. Someone says here privately, now that meetings are more easily accessible, management can seem less available on the ground. Yeah, we have less of that. What do they used to call it? MBWA, management by walking around, just kind of getting a feel and seeing what's going on in the office around you. Yeah. Kanamura says here, yes, hybrid is good for work-life balance. Yes, it does change the balance we have. Yeah. Someone's saying privately, I find returning to the office now so much more tiring compared to working remotely. Yeah. Our bodies need to get used to a routine, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Angela says, I'm surprised by how much I'm enjoying being back in the office because I really liked working from home. I didn't realize how much I missed the incidental interactions with my colleagues. So feeling very happy to have the opportunity to hybrid. Great, lots of really good comments in here. Someone saying anonymously would wish for more flexibility with hybrid working. And we're going to come to that point. You know, how much of a say do you feel you have in the model that your organization, department, or team is using? Thurston says here, hybrid working introduced at the time of the pandemic, but the requirement for hot desking will probably make this a permanent move in some areas of the British Library. Yeah. Colette saying here, bandwidth is an issue with meetings as this one, so sometimes I have to keep cameras off. Yeah, it does take a different mental bandwidth. And we know from research that when we're working online, even though we can see other people on camera, we're engaging in a much more analytical way, as opposed to an empathetic way as we do when we're in person with people. Because actually I'm analyzing what I'm seeing rather than just absorbing it and taking it in because it's natural to be in person with people. So there is still something around The kind of uncanny valley. I don't know if anyone has ever come across that. It's when something virtual is so close to being real, but you can still see the really big differences. Like I can see some of you, and I know all of you can see me, but we can't reach out and touch each other. I can't tell the movements of your body, the language of your body that would be in the room if we were together. So there are some, yeah, real key changes here. Steve says here we have a mix based on people's and business needs. For me, working full time at home is okay, but I'm starting to go back into the office a couple of days to help me in my role. Someone's saying, can I catch up on this later? I missed the start. Yes, I've put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat there. This recording will be available in a day or two. Santina's made a really good point. Some rural network internet access isn't good enough for working from home. Yeah. David saying rolled out in South Africa. Evelyn, my previous workplace, is now looking to sell their office space as a result of most staff working from home. Yeah, there's some really good points. We're not going to have time to get to them all, but I think you guys sharing with each other is just as important. We get plenty of folk here from all over the world, from all sorts of different organizations, as you can tell. Yeah, a lot of people talking about traveling to get into the work, hybrid being good, but needing to find a balance, finding that no one coming in and no point going in if no one else is there. I've had that experience a couple of times, being in the office and being the only one there. Yeah. Nikki's saying, I'm lucky as I work close to my office, so I tend to go into the office in the morning, but come home at lunchtime. Not a lot of people talk about that as a hybrid model. Half a day in the office, half a day at home. If the commute makes it available to you, you can kind of get the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yeah. And then they're saying here, hybrid and working remotely had greatly reduced unexpected drop-in and distraction, which I found beneficial. Yes. Thurston says, could you please tell us where the statistics in these quotes are from? And yes, give me 2 seconds while I load up my notes that remind me of that. But yes, I can. Jason says here, I'm a much more productive working from home as I have 4 additional hours that I'm saving each day. Yeah, this is a really good point. You know, that time saved due to the commute, and we're going to come back from that. Back to where that data comes from to Thurston that asked. So those first 2 statistics about hybrid working are from the recent Accenture report on hybrid working. And the data from the global survey that's spoken about below was a survey of 1,244 employees and managers across North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. So it's quite a large study, not quite as large as we'd like for some good psychological data, but it's getting there. Oh, really good discussions, everyone. Thank you, and keep them going. I also want to talk in a bit more detail. I've made a little list here, but let me know in the chat if there's any specific positives or negatives of remote or hybrid working that you'd like to point out, things that you'd like to share with the audience here, but also with us at CiC. The more of these that we're aware of as a supporting organization, the better, right? Now, remote working can impact flexibility. And that's a little bit vague, but it can make it more flexible for some people. For some people, however, in some organizations, where their organization is being quite demanding of that hybrid model and the certain days people coming, it can start to feel quite strict and quite restrictive. Yeah. Someone says here, someone made a point about people probably going into the office more due to bills rising and not being able to afford the increased bills of home working. Yeah, really important. That cost of living crisis, we covered that on a webinar recently. I think it is really important. I appreciate you picking that up for us. Yeah, I think that each of us will have personal circumstances about what makes it easy or not so easy to work from home. Some of us are, stuck in a bedroom still. Some of us have a bit more space, but certainly when it comes to paying the bills, I've noticed since both me and my partner work from home, our electricity bills going up in usage, not just in price. We all know they've gone up in price, but going up in usage as well, because I'm sitting here charging my laptop all the time. I've got screens on all the time that I wouldn't necessarily have. So yeah, this might be something that you might want to take back to your organization and speak about. Yes, okay, if you're expecting me to work from home these days, I might need some support in covering the bills. Yeah, thank you. Tamsin said here in the chat, negatives, loneliness. Yeah, really good point. Never getting a break from home, surrounded by the same walls and too many distractions. Yeah. Angela says here, positives for online meetings. They start and end on time, and I love that. Positives for being in the office, office plants, office kitchen, and seeing friends. Lovely. Steve said, for some of our staff, remote working cannot be done. They have to go into the workplace. That's what I was talking about earlier. This is create a bit of an us and them culture. Really good spot. Yeah, there is going to be that obvious difference between those that are in roles that can and those that can't work from home. Jocelyn agreeing with Tam's in there. Nikki saying negatives tendency not to leave the house. Yeah, I have that one as well. And it's so easy. It's so easy to sit inside and not go out all day. Yet when I'm in the office, I might go out 2 or 3 times, go and get coffee, go and get some lunch, even just go for a little walkabout. Yeah. Dave saying here, in my experience, established experienced people find the hybrid model to be beneficial, but new employees who need to learn the job role find permanent office work quite restrictive. Yeah, good point. Karen says, at home, you don't have micro breaks, chatting to colleagues, collaboration. Yeah, we're missing a lot of that. Rose says here, positive and negative, being able to multitask during briefings and other non-participatory meetings. Yeah, well, hopefully this one's not so non-participatory, but I'm realistic to know that some of you will be sitting here doing emails, responding to messages, typing something up. Yeah. Justin says here, people think that you're available if you're at home, even when you're meant to be working. Yeah, so it does change depending on who's in the home with you as well. Gemma's put a really important one here. Negative, I feel the need to account for every minute of productivity. And we do see this concept of productivity guilt coming quite strong for many people. Usually people rely, particularly early in their career, on having someone around who's, checking up on their work, letting them know they're on the right track, seeing the things that they're producing. So yeah, having that not be seen can be really difficult. Jill saying, I usually go for a swim around 7:30 a.m. to start the day fresh, feel less isolated that way for the rest of the day. Yeah, really good to have that kind of routine. And we'll touch on that. Someone saying here privately, my husband will always be working from home now and only may go into the office once a week, but he feels he can never be unwell as he is at home and he has everything he needs to work. So he feels he can't just sign off and be unwell. Yeah, again, a bit of that productivity guilt. Why am I more unwell if I'm working from home, but carry on working? I've noticed that so many times, particularly with a lot more people being ill over the past couple of years with COVID and coronavirus. I think people, pushing through that as well. Karen saying meetings can end up back to back when you previously couldn't physically get from one meeting room from the next. Yeah. So lots of stuff around productivity and what we're able to do. Santina puts an important point here. At home, when kids are from school holidays, it's hard to combine and multitask. Yeah, that's 2 jobs at once, parenting, well, 3 jobs, parenting, being an entertainer during the summer holidays and also doing your job. Yeah. Working more hours from home, Kane Mura says here as well. Yeah. And then finally, someone's saying privately, the expectation to work longer as you don't have to travel. Now, whenever I hear the expectation word, I'm really interested. Has that expectation been made explicitly to you? Has someone actually said to you out loud, now that you don't have to commute, I expect you to work longer hours? Or is it more of a felt expectation, something silent and unsaid? Those could be really difficult because we're not challenging it because no one said it, yet we're taking on the expectation and responding to it. David saying here, a lack of respect for personal time or sensible lunch breaks. Rose saying, as a manager, I find it harder to encourage my team members to take time off when they're unwell. Yeah, so it goes on both sides. Members of staff feeling that they can't be unwell and managers finding it difficult to encourage. Yeah, and the advantages here, I can take more time with my kids and my wife. Thank you, Kenamura. Yeah. I wanted to remind us of what happens to our brain when we're dealing with this stress of change and uncertainty. We switch into a different mode where we have less access to our memory in our hippocampus, less access to our control of our emotions in our prefrontal cortex. And that really changes the way that we communicate with others, how much we can empathize. So we tend to have a bit of a curve when we're responding to change and uncertainty. I'd love to hear in the chat where on this curve you feel you might be at the moment. What behaviors and emotions do you notice in yourself throughout these different stages of change? Because it's a fact, change is uncomfortable. For human beings and for any other animal out there, we do not like change. It conflicts with our fundamental human needs for safety, security, and certainty. We like to know what's coming next. We can also get change fatigue when we've been through change after change after change. All of us have been through this over the past few years. Every single one of us. This was coming on as a psychological topic even before the pandemic. We are in an ever rapidly large changeable world at the moment. And that can feel really difficult for us for these very animal reasons. So we might start off when someone presents us with a new bit of change, we might start off being in a little bit of denial about it. Even just denial that it'll affect us at all. Okay, I've rolled with a million punches, why not one more? We might dip into a bit of resistance where we're trying to hold on to what we had. We don't want that change to come or happen. Hopefully, as we get more positive and more optimistic about things, we can move into the exploration stage. This is where we start considering, okay, how is this change going to affect me? What can I influence? Where is my power? Where can I make the change work for me? And then finally, we can commit to that change. By the way, this looks all nice and simple and linear. It's not. We might jump around. I might start the day in commitment and go back to resistance after I realize it's not working for me and stuff like that. But it's always good to know where we are on here. Let me see what people are saying here in the chat. Someone's saying here, yes, I've been, oh, this is the person who was talking about working longer hours. Yes, I've been told on multiple occasions that I should make myself more available to the company as I'm not traveling. I think that's really harsh. There's a really harsh thing to expect of someone to change their working hours because they're working from home. So I don't know if you have an HR department you might be able to speak to about that, but I would certainly see that as part of the exploration stage of saying, hey, I want to explore actually what my working hours are here. What's the actual contractual expectation for me? Because if you don't have these kind of expectations in writing, it can be really, really difficult as a member of staff. Thanks for sharing that. So he's saying here, met more people nationally over Teams more than I ever did before from home working. Yeah, really good point. Nikki saying it's more of a felt expectation to be constantly working. Yeah, lots of good stuff on these advantages and disadvantages here. Someone says here, as a manager, I find it difficult to manage poor performance in a hybrid working setting. We haven't yet, here we go. My sentences are starting to fail me. We haven't learned yet how to do this well. It's a good point. There isn't a lot of research, as I've shown, and a lot of knowledge around how best to do this remotely. My biggest recommendation to you as a manager is to include your staff. Get us into that exploration mode. Tell people about the change that you know is coming as soon as possible. Give them options where they have them. The more people feel they have those options and that power, the less of a stress it's going to be. Kaz says here, there's an element of not believing this will stay as we've gotten used to constant changes. So yeah, that might be a little bit of that denial part of the curve there. Yeah. Someone's saying here privately, we have hybrid working with 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. But because it's an informal agreement, the days can change or be taken away week by week, depending on the team needs. I find this constant change quite hard, and I definitely feel resistant sometimes. It causes some stress. Yeah, this that change fatigue. And often if we feel like, because it does sound like that's quite informal and flexible, but actually what it means is it's informal and flexible in a way that the management can decide when you need to be in. That's what it sounds like a little bit. So let's try and get to that exploration mode and say that I'm feeling a little bit of resistance to this open-ended laissez-faire attitude to it. I'd much rather have a strict schedule of which days I'm in and which days I'm at home so that I can plan for them. Is that possible? Having that conversation with people. Because if we feel like we've just got to roll with the punches forever, yeah, we're going to be in that change fatigue. Gemma says here, responding to the explicit requirement from employers, presumably they were not paying you for the commute before. That's a really good point. Yeah. Niran says here, flexible working hours is an important element to increase productivity. I agree. Santina saying working remotely increases on reporting and more meetings at management level, but less on field supervision and project implementation. Yeah, and this is really key for those of you that are working in the field. That counts as working from the office. That is not working from home when you're in the field. Karen made a nice point here. I used to leave the office on time to catch the train, but now I don't have that divide, so I tend to work more. I think I'm in commitment, but I think what I'm committed to is sometimes different to what managers think. Yeah, so then maybe sometimes we need to take a step back to exploration and have a few more conversations around this so that we can be certain. Sharon say, I would I would say I feel committed, but then swing back to resistant when I'm expected to be in person. Yeah, so when more change comes in, yeah, we tend to swing back to the beginning. Why wouldn't we? Again, it's against our natural modes. Jocelyn said, management being completely flexible, which actually makes it harder. I prefer an agreed routine. That's the kind of conversation to have. Good stuff, everyone. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to check in, as we've started to do here, check in with what your needs are individually. Many of us so far will only have responded to the organization-wide communications or the conversations we've had with our team managers or our senior managers, whoever it might be. But how about reflecting on how you're feeling about your current working model? Specifically, how you're working this week. What are the pros? What are the cons? It's really important to try and divide things up into things that we can control, things that we have completely free choice over, things that I can influence where I might not have perhaps a completely free choice, but I can influence which choices are available, perhaps by speaking to my manager or HR or just other colleagues in my team. And then the last is the things that I can't influence or control. I'm going to go back to that person who talked about the difficult communications coming from government and politicians. Yeah, I can't influence or control that easily. So do I waste my time and energy on it, or do I try and find out what are the things I can control and what are the things I can influence and try and stay within those circles? So reflecting on how you feel right now is really important. And you might want to take 5 or 10 minutes after this presentation to do that. Take a little snapshot of this slide on your phone. Try and find some time for yourself this evening to think, okay, what are my needs? What are the pros and cons? Am I getting the support I need? These are really important questions to ask yourself. We will need different support to do our role at home than we will to do that role in the office. Some of us just due to the way our role works, others of us due to the way our team is made up, might be due to my capabilities, my abilities or disabilities. It could be due to all sorts of things that I need different resources. One of you making a really good point already. I need financial support to be able to work at home, to be able to pay the bills that run the equipment that my work is asking me to use. And as I said, focus on what's within your circle of control or influence and try and let go of those things that you can't influence or control. You can spend a lot of wasted time and energy on that. And then the last bit, and this is the bit that's a bit of a challenge, so I'd love to hear your responses to this in chat if you have them. Do you know what your default coping strategies are? The helpful ones and the unhelpful ones. When things feel too changeable, too uncertain, too stressed, too difficult, what are the things that you automatically go to? Being aware of those is really useful. See what's in the chat here. David says, in early days of hybrid working, what will be interesting is in, say, 12 to 18 months' time, what people's opinions are of this relatively new work practice for the masses. I agree. If we go back to those statistics right at the beginning, we're looking at 63% of high growth companies using this hybrid model. So yeah, we're going to have some potentially good research, but it's not going to come out for 12 to 18 months, as you say. And this is a new model, which is a new way of doing things for many people. However, I've noticed a couple of people in chat saying they've been doing this for 10 years. I don't know what all the fuss is about. So, let's see. But maybe it's different when one or two people are in an organization are hybrid working than when the whole organization is doing it. I think it does bring additional complexities. Yeah. Thanks for this. Someone's saying here privately, working from home still due to anxiety can perform job 100%. So why should I be pressured to do otherwise? So again, let's look at our areas of control here. I can't influence or control if people are pressuring me to do otherwise, but I can influence that they shouldn't be pressuring me. I can talk to people about that pressure being unreasonable and unfair and perhaps unlawful in some cases. And then what are the things I can control? Coming back to that all the time is really, really useful. Thank you for sharing that one. David said biscuits are my default strategy. Yeah, that's quite a good one. But then I know it sounds a bit boring and I try not to take the fun out of everything. Next time you're eating a couple of biscuits, David, consider, am I using this as a coping strategy? What am I avoiding here? Are there things I should be influencing or controlling instead? Matt says, I find my ability to reach people more quickly really helps. Face-to-face meetings are always hard to arrange. My work requires me to interact a lot, and remote working has opened up ability to reach people quickly and effectively. I feel I'm so much more efficient and effective. I used to spend weeks per year on trains and planes. I love this way of working. Yeah, I agree. Look, there are some things that being face to face is really important for, but for most things, a meeting online will suffice and will give you just the same connection, just the same information that you need. It's just important to think about, yes, you spent weeks per year on trains and planes, but what did that downtime, what did that traveling time do for your working week? Can you try and replicate some of those things that you were able to do that might have been positive as well? Someone saying here privately, recruitment of difficult to fill posts has improved as skilled workers can now live where works for them rather than where the office is. Highly agree. We've taken advantage of that as CiC. No longer are we looking just for clinicians that live and work in London, but we can work with clinicians all over the globe. Andrew says, my coping strategies include breaks away from the screen, going out for a short walk and some fresh air, and engaging with others outside my working day. Brilliantly, really good positive coping strategies. Karen said, food helps me deflect from an overwhelming to-do list. A chat with a colleague and a walk for a coffee used to be the help I needed in the office. So can you arrange that online? Can you have an online coffee break with a colleague? Absolutely. It's nowhere near as fun for some people, because some people it's the point of getting out. But just trying to think of doing things that you can do, back into that influencing and controlling. Santina saying, I work remotely, sometimes in the office and field visits for supervision, and at times it's heavy. Yeah, that change all the time again. We're coming back to that fatigue. Colette says here, some companies give a travel allowance to staff. So if some people are not coming into the office but are still receiving an allowance, it doesn't sit well with colleagues that are being asked to go into the office. Yeah, good point, Zahid. I personally produce and perform effectively while working from home, but sometimes face-to-face meetings are unavoidable. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And Birgit says here, I decorated my home office beautifully to make me feel more comfortable. Um, it's not up to me because you're going to all see it, but I've recently made some redecorations and some changes to this room, and it makes a huge difference. Again, back to things I can control and influence. I can control my surroundings when I'm at home. That's a big benefit to me versus the workplace. When I got into the office yesterday, I had to, find a hot desk, plug everything in, make sure, the keyboard works and all that kind of stuff. When I'm home, this is my domain. I've made it as comfortable as I can. Good point. Andrew says, he's getting the support you need. Our administrator has been amazing. I have duplicate sets of headphones, webcam, docking stations, and it means I don't have to carry in a tough tech sentences going again. I don't have to carry in a ton of techie stuff. So trying to have a good working environment in both places. I'm so influenced by having a nice space and place. And then absolutely agreeing with Birgit there. Yeah, really important point. If I'm traveling into work 1 or 2 days a week, maybe I'm having to lug quite a lot of equipment with me. Good points. Thank you. Look, try and take this time to check in with yourself. If it's not now, just try and do it afterwards. Finding a little bit of a space to do this on a daily basis is really useful. That important question, what are my needs today? It's so easy to forget those working from home. And now I want to talk a little bit more about resilience through change. Next month for September, our webinar is all going to be about resilience on this topic, defining it, looking at it in detail and how to build it. But we can also look specifically at how to build that resilience through change. I like sharing this quote, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So trying to find that resilience can be difficult for some of us. So it's really important to try and aim for some realistic optimism. It's so easy to fall into pessimism or even unrealistic optimism, just ignorant of it, just thinking everything's going to be okay. Keeping communication channels open is going to be so important with hybrid working, particularly for those of you that are spending more time remote than in the office. Having explicit conversations, and this is a really important one for any of the managers and leaders listening, having specific instructions for your team as to what tools we're going to use to communicate, for what types of communication and when, is really vital. Because if I've got the opportunity to use Zoom, Teams, email, WhatsApp, text, Telegram, all of that with my colleagues, which one do I use and when can be quite a difficult thing to work out on a case-by-case basis. Trying to adapt a growth mindset, or adopt a growth mindset. So rather than looking in at closed and what I can't do, trying to focus again on those spheres of influence and spheres of control. Again, taking that time out to reflect. Some of you said that as your kind of coping mechanisms, going out for a bit of fresh air, a bit of a walk, a bit of space in the day, and practicing that self-care. It's boring. I think I say it in every single one of these presentations, but doing it proactively and regularly, not just when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, but a good routine, because that can see us through change. Remember, change naturally is uncomfortable for us as animals, but if we have a routine that we're in control of, that we can influence, we're going to feel much less of that uncertainty and that anxiety around change. Matt's agreeing with Angela there in the chat. Let me know in the chat any of your tips for resilience through this constant change we're experiencing. Would be really useful. Dustin saying here in the chat, biggest benefit, online attendance of conferences, cost and time saving, better for the environment. Biggest drawback, sedentary behavior and less exercise. That reminds me to move around a little bit. And to remind all of you, by the way, just because you're listening to this presentation doesn't mean you have to be sat still and looking at the screen. Yeah, I need to stretch my neck a little bit, I've noticed. It's a bit tight today. Get up, move around, stretch a little bit, take those opportunities to do so. I like recommending people do that during meetings. If we're in a meeting in a room in an office, people might move around, stretch a little bit, look out the window, do the same online. The more we can replicate that in-person experience, the more comfortable it's going to feel. David says here, I find non-work related chats on Teams with colleagues really helps with feeling stressed. Yeah, having that open communication channel, really important. Sharon says, I've recently just changed teams from a team that communicated possibly once a week and ad hoc to a team that starts every day with a short team call. It's made a very positive difference. It's one of my tips later on, Sharon, is contact your colleagues early on in the day. If you're in touch early on in the day, it sets you up in that professional mode and mindset for the rest of the day. Sue says, definitely notice a difference when at home for more than one day in a row, less movement than exercise. Yeah. Sue says, routine is definitely key to resilience. Gemma says, the department I support are making real efforts to have a personal check-in with staff at the beginning of meetings, but not non-work things. Makes us more likely to think of each other as humans. Yeah. And finally, Steve here saying, yes, Sharon, my team has a short daily catch-up first thing to make up for those small chats you'd have throughout the day. Yeah. Someone saying here privately, some of their tips for resilience, keep them coming in the chat. Walking meetings, especially when joining info sharing sessions, are a positive coping strategy. Let us know in the chat, are any of you listening to this whilst out on a walk? It's a really interesting thing. We do not need to be at our desk for all of our meetings. Absolutely. Karen saying here, I'm part of a large team, but found my inner trusted buddies. We can say anything and it stays with those people. Having trust in some is key to being able to be authentic. I agree. And that trust makes us feel safe at work as well. If we've got trusted people that we can go to with our problems and our conversations, we're going to feel much more understood. No one will get you better than someone else working in the same team as well sometimes. No one will really understand you better. David says here, yes, Sharon, totally agree with morning catch-up meetings. Someone saying here privately, my company would very much disagree. You cannot be out during meetings. Well, look, there'll be some meetings for sure, but I don't know if it's a company policy that you're telling me about there, but that sounds a little bit rigid and strict to me. If we're asking our members of staff to be flexible when it comes to hybrid working, then perhaps we have to be flexible in our mindset as to how work's done as well. Colette says here, I do squats sometimes and have some hand weights I can do if I'm in a listening meeting rather than a participating one. Exactly. So if you're not able to get up and leave the desk and go for a walk, maybe there are things that you can do, to get a little bit of movement and exercise while you're there. Good idea, Colette. This one's particularly for the leaders and the managers in the call. So let us know in the chat, any managers or leaders here, if you've got any particular questions or tools and tips to share, now's a good time, because leaders play a key role during times of change. Absolutely vital. Most of us will look to our immediate manager or immediate leader when we're uncertain, when we're unsure. That's their job, right? Their job is to take away the things that are uncertain for us, to help us find that certainty, to let us know what it is we should be doing, and to increasing and fostering that environment of trust and compassion, just as Karen was saying there, your inner trusted buddies. We need leaders and managers to engage in regular communication with us. And when I say regular, I don't mean every 5 minutes checking in on me, but I mean at set times when I know I'm going to be speaking to my manager. Using those active listening skills. Have a look back on the YouTube channel. I'll put the link back there in the chat again for everyone. Have a look there at some of our previous presentations where we've talked about active listening. So there's one that's called supporting others with their mental health. Might be really useful there, because then you can check in and just listen to what people have to say. My favorite sentence for managers to use at the moment, and it actually goes back to one of these slides here. Are you getting all the support you need at the moment? Such a beautiful question for a manager or leader to ask. I don't need my manager and leader to be all of that support for me, but if they check in with me and I say, yes, I am getting all the support I need, fantastic. If I say no, they can then help me find that support. Again, they don't have to do it all, but they can help me link in with it. Managers should be really, really aware of all the sources of support available to members of staff so that you can promote it and signpost people to it. Providing updates around the future working model, even if the update is there is no new information and the position is unclear, it really stops that rumor mill from going and the conspiracy theories starting up, which can really easily happen if we're not in communication. And then role modeling healthy habits. A lot of the things that you people have said here in the chat today, there are members of staff from some companies here that are saying, I'm not allowed to do that. That's not possible. But if I was to see my manager taking a meeting while walking around the park and them letting me know that it's okay for me to do the same, it's going to feel much more possible and allowed. Steve says, from a health and safety point of view, we don't want people attending virtual meetings whilst walking, as it can be very distracting. Oh, I see. Well, perhaps there are some bad reasons to it as well. I hadn't really considered those. Thanks for sharing them. Yeah, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about, how that is more distracting than being physically in a room with 10 people. I don't know. Someone's saying here privately, regular communication and active listening, precisely what my previous company needed to do to make me stay. Yeah. Santina says here, my company checks team meetings, health situation updates, partners participation, and challenges around working areas. Brilliant. Really good as well to know exactly what it is my manager is going to be checking in with me on. Fantastic. Steve said, we've had accidents happening or near misses with people on foot. Oh, okay. So it's distracting to them while they're walking if they're on the, I thought you meant it was distracting to the other people in the meeting. That makes much more sense now. Thanks, Steve. Much appreciated. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you are walking in a meeting, a nice reminder from health and safety there, be very careful. Yes. And he says, even non-leaders can do some of these things too to support those around us. And if leaders aren't being so good at them, yeah, good point. Doesn't just have to be down to managers to provide that support. I've also popped in here a few slides from one of the presentations we did right at the start of the pandemic, which was staying well while working from home. These tips remain. Stick to your routine, set your alarm as usual. Human beings, like any other animal, we like certainty and routine. Shower and clean your teeth, get dressed. It doesn't have to be a suit. I am in a long-sleeved t-shirt and a pair of shorts. It's fine. But if I still wear the same clothes that I wore to bed last night or that I wore while I was hanging around the flat last night, I'm not going to feel as clean and comfortable. And if I feel kind of slobbish like that, it's going to affect my mental health quite quickly. And having a good breakfast. I have become all of your parents and caregivers straight away. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, particularly when we're dealing with change and uncertainty. And if we can do that and begin engaging with our colleagues early, it's really good setup for our body hormonally, psychologically, digestively. Lots of really good points there. Matt says here, headphones and walking on known safe routes works. Avoid traffic and it really works. Yeah, walk around a park, something like that. Yeah. And what else can we do? Take breaks. Boring. Easy to forget though. How many breaks? Let me know in the chat. For those of you that it's 4:20 in the afternoon, how many breaks have you taken today? It's coming towards the end of the working day. Did you take a lunch hour if you're working at home? Did you take one if you're working in the office? I'd be interested to hear. Did you take 5 minutes here and there? Best practice says to schedule one every 2 hours and take them every time. Move away from your workspace. If you can't go outside, find a spot near a window. I have to close this when I'm in these presents. Look at that. That is sun in London. destroys my camera completely. That's how bright it is. But really, we need that kind of outside time. And lots of people type in the chat here. Good. We'll come back to that in a second. But leaving your laptop and your work phone in your workspace while you take a break, again, really vital. If I take a break and all I do is sit there looking at emails, I'm not taking a break at all. My brain's still at that same productivity level. And take that break, take time during that break to practice some breathing exercise or schedule a chat with friends and family. Angela's saying here, one of the nice things about online meetings is that they can have different purposes. So if it's a good to know meeting rather than a participate and contribute meeting, it's nice to be able to take off the headphones, put the meeting on speaker, walk around and do crochet while listening. Yeah, brilliant. And it's really good if you're the one hosting the meeting, if you can give people that allowance. You can say, look, for most of you here today, this will just be about listening and taking in the information. So if you want to walk around, hang up your washing, do whatever, just make sure you're on mute and yeah, we'll still see you. Absolutely fine. Someone says here privately, meant to have 2 breaks plus lunch today, only did 1 and cut lunch short. Someone says, get a display screen assessment of your desk. Dining tables are not ergonomic. No, absolutely not. Justina, yeah, that's actually a really good point. A lot of these resources were shared at the start of the pandemic in companies, but going back to them, having a look about what's available to you in terms of desks, chairs, monitors, stands, having those ergonomics looked at so that you're as healthy as possible while you're being sat for a long time. Yeah. Justina says coffee breaks and a good lunch hour for a walk around the local park with the little one. Lovely. Clay Nomura says lunchtime, tea break, and a small discussion with colleagues about news. Great. Kaz says, I'm actually better at work-life balance working from home. I feel more watched in the office. Really good to notice what your own responses are there. Matt says, I diary the breaks and always build in 10 minutes between meetings and start and finish on time. Good. You'd make a very good therapist. 10 minutes between meetings and starting and finishing on time. That's our mantra. Justina says, I also got a rowing machine in a garden and I sometimes start the lunch break with a 15 minutes rowing. Yeah, a little bit of exercise really helps us feel, again, more powerful, more in control, less stress, less anxiety. Sharon says, I take 1 lunch break, 1 hour and stop for cups of tea nearly every hour. I have a garden office, so I need to walk back to the house about 30 seconds to make a cup of tea. So you're forced to get up and move. Great. Josh saying again, more lunch breaks at home. Someone saying here, it's an excellent session. Time for me to leave for mosque to offer 5th prayers of the day. Good to see you. Many thanks and see you next time. Karen says, just moved to the lounge with my laptop. Thank you for the move around push. Good. Yes, even if it's for the last 5 minutes of this presentation, get up and move around a little bit. Great. Someone says here privately, there's a feature in Outlook to start meetings at 5 past the hour and 5:02. I'll look into that. Thank you. And a little bit more on creating a healthy workspace. One of you said it here in the chat here. Yeah, a dining room table, as we can see in this picture, is perhaps not the most ergonomic for working and sitting. We are working and sitting for hours and hours, so it has to be right for us. But if it's something that you can pack up at the end of the day or leave, it's really useful. Even if it's just the same sofa you're using a different side. And if you can cover your workstation with a sheet or a towel, because if it's in eyesight, it's so easy for our brain to flick back into that mode and think, oh, I could just check this, I could just finish, I could do that, and then suddenly our working day is stretching. Ask what you need from work to be productive. If your keyboard isn't comfortable, ask work for a keyboard. If your desk isn't comfortable, talk to them about that. Really good points. Working with HR and IT to ensure the tech is seamless, absolutely vital. I've had a couple of times over the last few years where there's members of my team or members of other teams that are having real trouble with IT when working remotely, and it's pushed them into a really difficult state. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about work and home separation. This is something that is up to us now. As many of you have said, there used to be that natural break for most of us when commuting, not all of us now. So we need this third space. And what it is this transition space between 2 environments, usually our first space, work, and our second space, home. Because we've lost that commute when we're working from home, it's impacted our ability to transition and blurred those work-home boundaries. I know I'm preaching to the converted here. No one has worked through this pandemic and not felt this little bit of blurring of these lines. Now, what we usually do on that commute is we have 3 R's. We're doing a bit of reflecting, Maybe how do I interpret what just happened to me in the day? How do I file these things away that I'm working on in the workplace? Maybe I'm resting, usually. Those of you that commute by bike, even if you're being active, you can be resting your mind and then resetting. How am I going to show up at my next place? How am I going to show up at home? What's needed as me as a partner, maybe a father, maybe a brother, a sister, a flatmate, even? What's needed of me for myself when I get back home? Trying to find that third space is still really, really important. Nothing's changed here. A couple more tips on working well remotely. Choose the right collaboration tools. Respect cultural differences as well as differences in time zones and working hours. We have to make sure that when we're putting these changes on everyone as an organization, that there are going to be different effects. There's going to be some people that receive it in a different way. There's going to be some people where it breaks some things that they've been doing for a long, long time, some routines they've held. A colleague here was able to say, I have to leave and go to mosque for the 5th prayers of the day. How easy is that to do if you've been forced to work from the office on that day, whether you like it or not? Designated opportunities for communication and socializing outside of work. I know it got a bit boring during the pandemic because we were doing this at work and with our friends and with our family members, but finding some of that time to socialize is so important. Learning and practicing online meeting etiquette. And if you're working in that hybrid format, trying to think of having an anchor day so that most of the team is in the office and they can collaborate together so that you can schedule work to be done there. There is nothing worse these days than someone feeling forced to be in an office for 8 hours and spending 7 of those 8 hours on online meetings. You've wasted an hour and a half of their day, probably each way, commuting, average. And you've wasted their productivity time, their collaboration time by filling it up with those kind of meetings. Yeah. David says here, my hour commute used to be a real therapy and that all my work frustrations were left in the car. So that third space is vital. And I've still not worked out how to achieve this with the hybrid model. My best recommendation, and thanks for that comment, David, is routine, is setting some time for yourself. The commute did that automatically. If you found it enjoyable in your car, finding somewhere to go in your car every day after work for 5 minutes. Just go and park somewhere beautiful and look at a nice view, or drive to, walk around the park. I nearly said pub then. It is getting towards the end of the day. Gemma says, David, my family swears by going straight out for a walk or yoga after you log off. Yeah, I swear by it too. If I can't shut my brain off from this, it will stay with me all evening. And then it will disturb my sleep. And then I'm less of an adaptive, less of a useful member of staff the next day. Cool. So don't do it alone. It's our recommendation all the time. Talk to your leader, discuss it amongst your team, use the technology available to you, and reach out to family and friends, or to a mental health professional. That's what we're here for at CiC. We are here to support all of you with all of this. So think carefully. What helps you balance and how do you switch off? Just that conversation I was just having there with David. I like the idea of going out into the car to visit a good space. Yeah, absolutely. What helps you balance? What helps you switch off? Checking in with those things is really important. Non-work time at home and at the office has become more important. That includes socializing, hobbies, family, cooking, whatever it might be. Be the one in your office that's, restarts all those things around, people doing bake-off competitions. We've got here at CiC next month, September, which is probably, the easiest thing to get people moving a little bit more. Just a couple of little initiatives like that can really, really help. So as a last reminder, you all have access to Well Online, and I'll put the link to that in the chat. You'll all have different logins. So if you don't have it, make sure you speak to your HR department or whoever looks after your benefits, and they should be able to help you with your login there for Well Online. Click on the Work Life tab. We've got lots of tools and tips there. Sign up for our newsletter at cicwellbeing.com. If you go to the bottom of our corporate page, you can see there, sign up for our newsletter. That way you'll hear about these every single month. I've put a link there in the chat, finally, to the YouTube channel. Go and subscribe. You'll get an alert once a month when these new recordings go up for those that you've missed. If you're a CiC customer already, and you'd like to talk more about some of these training or group sessions we can provide, get in touch with your account manager. And if you're new to CiC, if you've somehow turned up here and you've never heard of us before, which happens quite a lot as far as I've been told, go and have a look at cicwellbeing.com, and there's a contact us form that you can use to get in touch. Finally, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for those of you that have been watching the recordings on YouTube. Let us know if you've got any questions or comments, and I'll see you all again in the next one. Take care.